Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Word from Tomorrow podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Keith Lettinen.
Hello, everybody.
Keith, we are getting very close to the end here.
We are, and it feels like it. It really does.
It's been quite the journey.
Yeah.
But to continue on that journey, we are joined for Volume 9, The Cure, by Duke.
Hi.
Duke, it's great to get you on. You've been on Men of Steel a whole bunch of times, but it's been a minute since we've had a chance to chat.
Yeah, it's been a while. I'm kind of excited to be doing this one because I never thought I'd be able to talk about Transmetropolitan in any capacity for a while.
Yeah, I mean we've talked about the state of things with the Warren Ellis of it all a few
Yeah,
times at this point. Um, it's one of those ones where we're not divorcing ourselves the art from the artist completely, but because we have like reflected on some of those elements that have seeped into the actual writing. I was just editing episode 3 today, where we talk about the Yelena scene and how it's like a little weird in the
yeah,
context of knowing like stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also still a really prescient work that has a lot of really interesting things to say that I think is a worthwhile thing for us to talk about. And so I'm glad to get you on. What is your experience with Transmetropolitan?
I think when I was in high school, it was one of the series I basically read going into comics because by around 17 or 18, I was listening to a lot of podcasts like The League of Extraordinary Ordinary Gentlemen, Leog from Spill.com. Back then when Spill uh, was a thing. I was listening to their podcast, and they would refer to like Transmetropolitan, Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen as some staples you can get into. And uh, when I was in my early 20s, I was basically going on a big Warren Ellis hit, Warren Ellis ride, which was Planetary, uh, Stormwatch, Authority, and I was just kind of falling in love with this guy's style of writing. Kind of like his very dry wit, his approach to characters who feel very mercenary, you feel very kind of like addicted to like caffeine, like they're just trying to like keep themselves alive as they go in about their jobs, no matter how kind of evil or ugly it is. But they do the work, and it's very mercenary, kind of like his preference for characters. And then Transmetropolitan was this, and also like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was my big kind of wake up call for Spider Jerusalem as a character. And then after that, it was like being that guy looking on TV tropes and wondering, Patrick Stewart, really? Kind of
Right.
deal.
I love this comes up every single time.
It does.
Yeah.
Like there was going to be a Transmetropolitan adaptation, and you know Patrick Stewart was going to play him. Like what interesting, because I thought Spider wasn't, but
Well, so that's the thing we've chatted a lot about is who would you cast and or what is the voice of Spider Jerusalem in your head?
yeah, he would sound like Dale Gribble from King of the Hill. The more I think about it, I guess I could see Patrick Stewart in a way. It'd be its own thing. Like he'd be as furthest divided from like Hunter S. Thompson, because when I think of him, I think of the guy that played him in that movie that I won't mention.
Yeah. Another problematic guy.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, not that Hunter S. Thompson wasn't also kind of problematic, just
Oh, that that
in
Or
too, that too.
yeah,
Yeah, which we should also keep that in mind as well. So
yeah. Well, so one of the things that we've had an interesting conversation back and forth about is like where is Warren Ellis's British voice bleeding into him trying to have an American character, and like I
yeah,
like this chapter, for example, very very early on, he refers to someone as like my puppet, and like
yeah, yeah,
it's like yeah, he's doing a voice like the character like in
yeah.
universe the character is doing like like a bit right there, but at the same time, it's like.
that bit.
Yeah, it's a bit that it's like, well, but
Yeah.
that's clearly something a British person thought to say.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah.
At least he managed to go the whole volume without shitting on the Irish, the Scottish, or the Welsh this time.
That's right. Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. So Dale Gribble, that's a good one. That one thing I love is that everyone has had something new to say in terms of like their voice for Spider Jerusalem,
Yeah.
Mhm.
uh, which really just speaks to like how broad of an interpretation people have for this character, who has like legitimate like frames of reference that people can like go and look at, but at the
Yeah,
same time it's like it's not Hunter S. Thompson, like
yeah.
it is someone doing a Hunter S. Thompson style character.
Oh yeah,
uh,
it's like the elements of that character, it just fires offward, and it's like, okay, what does that sound like to me? Because sometimes it's like, well, I have to go back to like, where was he born? Was he American? Was he actually English? Stuff like that, and trying to figure out like, oh well, any English actor can do an American accent, So like that's kind of a moot point. Not so much the other way around, as we all know. Unless you're Peter Dinklage, then you could probably do a British accent.
Peter Dinklage would be an interesting one,
Oh
particularly
man.
Yeah,
voicing the part. But yeah,
it would be like Tom Hardy or something.
Yeah. I've
That
I, I've
I
really
could see.
warmed up to the Ewan McGregor thing we talked about before from Train Spotting era. Like,
Oh,
yeah, we
oh.
kind of that came up in a recent episode. I really warmed up to that.
Now I would say Tom Hardy only because it's like he technically did play a young Patrick Stewart in one movie,
that's true.
so he would
Also, he's
just
a
be
fucking weirdo.
really buff. He would totally dive into this kind of character.
Speaking of diving in, why don't we start doing our rundown of? Oh, actually, wait, sorry, Keith, where are we so far in the story for the listeners at home?
Okay, I'll make this short because I'm not summing up 8 volumes. Um, Rogue journalist Spider Jerusalem is currently trying to take down his second president, the Smiler in this case, the worst person that has ever lived and the bane of my existence. Joined by his filthy assistants, he has gone from the peak of the literary world, living in a penthouse apartment, to the basement, and he's has a little bit of a stable situation now, but we actually don't see a lot of it in this volume. Spoilers, but we do get to kind of like see him he's getting to the ground level now. He's getting to the ground to rebuild this case that has been destroyed by the recent catastrophe, well, intentionally, and getting dirty and becoming a real rogue journalist. And I'm so
Mhm.
excited because, yeah, this is him like really getting to the meat of it, and I really, really like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good synopsis of where we're at here. Yeah, so why don't we dive in? Um, so we open the first chapter. Here comes the sun, with
Doo 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 doo.
yeah, and Shannon's waking up, and what does she find in her bed? But a thing from her nightmares. She wakes up next to Spider Jerusalem.
I swear to God, I thought it happened again, and I was like, God damn it! Like I was like, he just can't help telling that story, can he? Like, but thankfully,
No, but Shannon wouldn't. That's not the relationship that they have.
yeah,
Uh,
100%.
Even though Shannon wakes up in horror upon seeing Spider in her bed and confirming that it wasn't just a dream, but but Spider quickly reveals that he was just fucking with her.
Yeah, I like that. It's fun. I like that it didn't end up being that way, and I like that we kind of start off on a fun beat in the volume. You know what I mean? Like, because it's been pretty heavy.
Yeah,
It's been pretty heavy for a couple of volumes. So
yeah, some light ribbing between Spider and his assistants. You know, in the grand scheme of things, this is yeah, it's just a joke, and it's a callback to an earlier scene that they've talked a lot about, and Shannon's extremely aware about.
it is funny because maybe for one moment Shannon's like, "Oh, I'm just as bad as she is." Like I like that. I also like the yet another example of him preferring cats over dogs as a writer, with the cat dragging in a dead dog.
Right.
Like I was just like, yeah, he hates dogs. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But we cut to Spider and his assistants traveling in a car outside of a McVeigh High School, which of course is a Timothy McVeigh reference.
Which has got
Where
barbed wire along the top of the fence, by the way.
Yep. And well, and they've got thought scanners when you come
Oh
in.
yeah,
So
yeah.
a student is pulled aside because he had thoughts about bombs and whatnot. And he's like, I watched an action movie the night before, and he's getting expelled.
That's that's some dystopian next level shit. That is just believable enough in the current political climate to scare me a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Spider and Shannon both sort of reflect on how guns were actually encouraged back when they were kids. Uh,
Like
although,
I like the teachers had an unfair advantage.
right.
That's great.
And Spider tells his assistants that they're heading to the disaster zone because they're starting at the end. And he's really embracing the fact that he has brain damage at this point.
Yeah.
He's having a good old time talking about how he doesn't need to make sense anymore. He can just do things the way he wants to do it. So we get a lot of coverage of what this disaster area looks like. And you know, it's Derek Robertson art. It just looks great in term like it looks awful, but it looks, you know, the
Yeah.
artwork is great.
Mhm.
It's what's the word I'm looking for? It's poverty in the ugliest, most beautiful way possible. Like it's just hideous. Also, the guy's wearing the three-eye shirt, by the way. So that was cool.
Yeah, I was just checking the publishing date on this one to see where this falls in relation to the 9/11
Probably
situation that
about a month before.
yeah, like
Yeah.
because I was thinking like this makes me think a lot of Hurricane Sandy and
Yeah,
Katrina. Um, actually, Katrina is probably the biggest example that comes like right after this. Like it's a few years later.
yeah.
Um, but 9/11 could also be sort of an example of like a disaster zone kind of situation. But none of this is apparently what this book is pulling on. It's just predicting the future.
Mhm. It's just taking what's pretty much been happening and kind of threading the next logical conclusion of like how does this work in a very kind of sci-fi dystopia, and it's always going to be the same, irregardless if it's now or 10 years or maybe 2 years after the fact. It's always going to be the same disaster and the same people targeted, and they're all just kind of swept under the rug, even though the real ugliness is out there that these poor people are suffering through.
Yeah. And it's a familiar playbook.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So they arrive at the Vita Severn Memorial Federal Disaster Zone.
That motherfucker. Like I got so angry when I read that.
Yep. Well, you're not the only one who got really angry about it. Yelena gets
Yeah.
very angry. Uh,
Hmm.
and she, like, in terms of us tracking how Yelena is just turning into Spider,
Right.
she goes off on a very Spider kind of rant. And then points out to Spider, like, why aren't you angrier?
I love her so much.
Yeah. Just the way her face kind of just warps to it. Like it's so well drawn here because she's holding that cigarette and her face kind of gnarls into that, and you can see it on Shedden's like, oh, I'm seeing it. I can see it now.
Yeah.
She's becoming more like him, which is
Yeah.
such a very nice little subtle thing going on.
Yeah. It's yeah, again, we kind of talked about in the past how Shannon's a little more numb to things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like and because and this she's like, yeah, yeah. She like she might be outraged by the name, but she's not outraged by the sight of everything because she's like, yeah, this is what happens. You know what I mean? Like this is poverty. This is what it looks like.
Hmm.
And yeah, Yelena is just outraged, and I love it. I love her just shaking with outrage, punching the fucking floater aside and everything. I thought that was cool.
And then Spider just, in response to her, just takes a picture of
Yeah,
the scene.
Yeah.
because he's
Uh,
got limited time, right? Like he's like, I have a job to do at this point. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah, and so he says, I'm working," and he walks off, and Shannon finds this like kind of amusing, and the fact that she finds it kind of amusing pisses off Yelena even further. So Yelena says, like, "You're a bodyguard, but like guard us," and she says, "If I have to start protecting you from yourself, I want to raise, bitch." So they go get food and they talk it out, and they point out that what is going on here is that this allows for martial law, that the reclamation zone is not the entirety of the disaster area. The martial law covers the whole city. Um, and so they they start discussing like, so what's the problem that they have with the city specifically, beyond the fact that it's where Spider lives. Um, and Spider brings up this whole election like stat that where like the city typically goes with in your first term it will go for you if you're going to be the president, but then after that it will vote against you in all successive ones, which is just Spider's way of pointing out that none of this makes any sense, that all these like rules of thumb of politics are all kind of bullshit.
And it is interesting, of course, in a city like this where things don't really get better very often, they would usually swing, on a second term president. Like they would be like, you didn't fix anything. Like,
Mhm.
so it makes sense. But yeah, there's also the aspect of like there's something more here. Like what, yeah. There's a deeper plan, which we're used to from the Smiler.
Yeah. I want to call attention to the fact that this meal is very squicky. Like, he's eating like seahorses, and there's just like goo flying everywhere while he eats. Uh, this is not the only time I've noticed that like their meals typically are. I mean, obviously he eats like caribou eyes and stuff. Like the food is always supposed to be kind of gross in this world.
Yeah.
But it was a spot where I was like really noticing that like the attention to the like goo flying off of the food as they eat it.
Seafood Denethor. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I had this at a New York City museum once.
So as they head out, Shannon points out that with Callahan's wife dead, his approval rating is super high. And she says right now he could fuck lambs in the ass in the middle of Century Square and get a round of applause for it. And you know what the fuck that sounded like to me?
The first episode of Black Mirror. No.
No, well,
No, it sounded like frankly Trump saying that I could kill someone on Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
It sounded a lot like that. Yeah. I mean,
which
this is one of the most prescient volumes we're
Which,
going to read.
which
yeah,
is very distracting considering what she's throwing in that panel.
yeah.
Yeah, that's Transmetropolitan in a nutshell. Is just like heavy political discourse that feels uncomfortable, and also
Yeah.
a small person dressed as Hitler being thrown. Like it's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Derek, just draw this part and I'll just fill in the dialogue.
Yeah, and then Spider thinks to himself, "There's something I haven't done in a while, which is just run around on top of cars and causing a rampage kind of scene." But this time, it's not him by himself. Like he gets a little bit of a rant, which I find very fun. That eventually leads to him shouting at a driver saying, "Show me your fucking thumbs."
So
Uh,
good.
and then the next panel, he's just bouncing on cars, shouting "thumbs," and it looks very much like Mario.
Yeah, it's great. And it leads to again the filthy assistants being like, "Fuck it, let's do it too." Like,
Yep.
and I love that. Yeah,
I love Yelena just like kicking out someone's windshield just for the fun of it.
yeah.
Like she's inherited the sociopathic traits of Spider Jerusalem at this point. Um,
Unfortunately,
yes, unfortunately, if this was not a work of fiction, I would be abhorred.
I adore her. That's all I'll say.
And they note that it's a lot harder to do this than Spider makes it look. Like Spider's very, very practiced at jumping on top of cars.
They're like, we underestimated your fitness level, actually.
Right. Shannon goes, "What's the first thing we do?" And he goes, "Run down the street like a motherfucker." And so they do.
Again, starting on kind of like a lighter tone, bring it up a bit because it's been so dreary, and we're gonna get dreary again. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's a really good place to have a little bit of an up. This whole issue actually is a very cathartic, fun issue. Um, f- for the most part, fun. I don't want to say fun
Fun
for
is
all of
the
it. Yeah,
part. Cathartic, yes. I
yeah.
100% agree about it being cathartic. Fun is an interesting
Th-
description for some of the
There's
violence that
there's
occurs.
a I'm trying to the word is not occurring to me for some reason, but where Schadenfreude of wanting to be like watching Fred Christ this entire fucking series. And we're gonna get to it, so I won't spoil it, but that finally coming out. It not necessarily fun, but it's like, fuck yeah, finally. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they kick open the door to a bar, and two transients are like, "This is a private bar," and Spider goes, "Filthy assistants deal," and they both fire bowel disruptors at them, or at least we're led to believe they're bowel disruptors. And it's basically confirmed by dialogue next.
Well,
But
one of them is clearly shitting himself in the picture, like his
yeah,
pants
yeah,
are full. So like,
Yeah,
yeah.
his
They're it's bowel disruptors. Yeah,
yeah,
his
yeah,
pants are darkening.
yeah.
yes, yes. Pants darkening.
I do like that Derek chose to draw their bowel disruptors looking different, like Yelena's being bigger and stuff. I like that little just kind of like character touch. I think it's cool. It'd be very easy to just make them, perfectly the same, but that doesn't really make sense for them. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, no, it's nice that we have those little bits of flair differences between it. Maybe it's different model numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm assuming
Or
he
it's just
made his
like
bowel disruptor. Like,
Yelena's just going all in, like you're shitting the whole load, buddy. And Shannon's like, just a little bit. Like, holy crap, what are you doing?
Oh, you think the barrel gets wider depending on like the sphincter settings?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's like the phaser settings. It's like, oh wow, full release. My
uh,
goodness.
I like the idea that like in character, Shannon's more subtle, right?
Mhm.
She'd
Yeah.
want something that is easier to hide, whereas Yelena wants you to start shitting yourself before she shoots you. Like she's inherited that from Spider. She wants to terrorize you,
Yeah.
and I kind of
She's
like that.
going maximum volume.
Yeah, she's like just this big ass thing to make you look at. I like that idea.
So the bartender starts to threaten Spider, and when he starts to pull a gun, Spider whacks him with his cane and then
Mhm.
knees him in the face and kicks him a few times and then says, "That man is full of shit." And then Shannon just says, "Not for long," and they both
It's
aim their guns.
That's such a good one-liner.
It's
I love it
such a
so
good
much.
one-liner. But then Spider walks into the back room, and a person who's just sitting there. I'm guessing he's several. I mean, there's empty bottles all over, so like we know he's pretty drunk because he doesn't respond to Spider like making all that noise outside and then like coming up behind him. It's only when he gets the chair pulled out from under him and then yanked up by his neck where we see it's Fred Christ, and Spider says, "This is our final conversation. It will be a good one."
Yeah,
Love
he
will
was
come.
like
Oh, good.
totally hiding out for like just just pretend I'm not here. I'll be in the back room looking at these beer bottles.
I'm so happy we're coming full circle with this. Like this is volume one. We're going back to volume one where all this
Hmm.
shit started. And again, it's kind of cool because Spider said we're starting at the end. They're kind of starting at the beginning at the same time, and I think that's like a cool like twist on that. So
Yeah. And then we pick up the next issue is Happy Talk, and it opens with a splash page of just Fred Christ getting decked in the face.
my favorite part was, uh, I mean, I'm skipping a page, but there's not a lot of dialogue where he says, "Will you hit me if I stand up? No more hitting." And he hits him again. I love it so much. That's so fucking funny to me.
Well,
Like, no,
well,
I
then he
won't
just
hit
like,
you.
yeah, well, he bats him around and he says, "It's not nice when people lie to you, is it?"
Yeah, it's so good. It's great because if someone does that to you, you can't trust anything they're saying at that point because they just lied to your face, and now they could just hit you if they wanted to, and that's horrifying. I love it. It's so good. It's so dehumanizing. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly like Fred Christ had to be a real piece of shit for us to feel that this issue is as cathartic as it is, and it is as cathartic as it is, because Fred Christ was a real piece of shit.
Yeah, and we actually find out a little bit more how much of a piece of shit he is as we get into this. So yeah,
So, Spider says that they need to talk about Fred's connections to the Smiler, and specifically his campaign in the city. Um,
I want to real
and
quick before we jump into that, the page opposite, that shot of his face with Fred's eyes reflected in his glasses, in Spider's glasses,
oh yeah,
is one of my favorite shots in this entire comic book.
especially because it's the human eye in the little lens, and then like the alien
Yes.
eye in the big lens.
Fucking brilliant. That's just a brilliant, brilliant choice.
Yeah, look, it's really good shot right there. But so Spider breaks off a chair leg, and
The chair leg.
yeah, Shannon says, "Jesus, Spider," and Fred says, "You wouldn't dare." Um, but Spider says, "There's no back talking here," and goes into a whole rant about this. Eventually, starting to talk to the chair leg. He says, "It's the chair leg of truth. It does not lie." Um, what does it say? It says, "Shut up, Fred. Can you hear it?"
It's so crazy because we've talked about him like his cartoonish violence, throughout the book. And this is that cartoonish violence, but done in a serious situation. We're bringing his two worlds together, kind of, in the storytelling of him taking this shit seriously, but also at the same time, he's still Bugs Bunny. He's just literally a horribly dangerous Bugs Bunny, and I love that.
Yeah, or you could say that it's all of a sudden like looking at Bugs Bunny with fresh eyes and seeing the violence
Yeah.
Mm.
in like a real context. But so Spider asks him, he wants to know when Fred first got involved with Gary Callahan, and Fred says the Angels Ate riot, which means that we go full circle to the start of the series. Shannon gets up close because, well, she's ready to assist if anything needs assisting. But also, she has a personal connection. She was a bride of Fred Christ.
Another
And
reason I hate him.
and she wants to know about this because the Angels 8 riot happened right where she worked. She witnessed this riot and it was a horrible thing for her. She was in tears during it.
This is what put her on the path. You know what I mean? Like, she wouldn't be here if that didn't happen. Like, she wouldn't be Spider's assistant or bodyguard at this point. So,
Right.
yeah.
We saw the handoff in volume one, where we saw a bunch, or what Spider identified as lawyers giving money to some transients that he thought was just to start the riot, or do something. He wasn't like he assumed that it was the Beast trying to crack down on something, but it turns out it was actually the Smiler setting this up to create a bad look for the Beast and for the mayor of the city, who was one of the Beast's people at the time. Um, so the fact that Spider saw it and wrote about it, like already like is putting like the screws to the plan, like right from the get go.
Yeah, it is interesting because again, we're going back to the beginning to see this. We talked quite a bit in that episode about like what is going on here. You know what I mean? Like we don't see the actual like we talked about the inciting incident of what actually caused the riot. And we had some assumptions about it. I thought we might actually get a straightforward answer about it. We don't really get that. But we do get so much more texture as to what's happening and reframing it as the mayor, about the mayor, not about the beast, was really interesting because it makes me think about what we learn about the beast later on, about him, being a bastard, but not being the smiler. You know what I mean? It kind of like makes me look back a bit. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, it was definitely an election of who is the lesser of two evils, and it's really
Mhm.
frustrating to see that the Smiler was the worst of the two evils.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Fred explains that the money that he got from this whole situation is what allowed him to buy the religious status for his church, which we kind of already knew. Like we uh,
We
or
could
at least
piece
we could
that
put the
together.
pieces
Yeah.
together. Yeah. Um, and while he's talking about this whole thing, we cut to Yelena, who's sitting in the back, and she's holding a recorder, and we can see that the light is lit up and that she's recording the whole thing.
We would be remiss if we don't mention Shannon saying, I want to shit in your heart.
Right, she's taking this very personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another zinger for her today.
So Fred opines that he was always the loser, that he never was able to be top dog in any situation, and that he jumped on the transient movement because it gave him the opportunity to be a big shot for once. And he kind of talks about sort of the issues with the transient community and like the type of people who tend to go for it. It's what we've said, that it's always been depicted as something of a cult and for people who were looking just for something to belong,
Yeah.
as opposed to people who had like real profound like identity kind of changes to it.
Yeah. Which again, I've talked about this before. I actually really, really appreciate them making this distinction because originally I remember I was very worried that like this was going to be a commentary on trans people. And it's getting further and further from that. I think we're getting a
Yeah.
distinction like this is something completely different. Don't confuse that. And I
Yeah.
really appreciate that because I was a little bit worried about that at the beginning.
And Fred tries to sort of pat himself on the back for his decision to become a part of this whole thing by pointing out that like his visual cortex has changed, and so he's having a lot of sex with what looks like Marilyn Monroe to him every night, and that's enough to piss off Shannon to actually take a swing at Fred.
Yeah. Which he takes, by the way, and just moves on. I think he knows he deserved that one. So
Yeah. So he talks about how he was bought off cheaply, and notes that Vita never liked him. And that the scene at the convention now sort of has additional context for what was going on, because it like this is Fred who had already been sort of like promised like political cachet with this new administration already being pushed to the back. And we saw that earlier, and now we understand more about like why he was in such a bad mood at the time.
I think an interesting revelation is Vita, Vita not liking Fred, right? Well, and I'm like looking at this, so Vita knew Fred was involved in this. So obviously we look at Vita very positively. We adore Vita. Um, and we kind of look at her like the public looks at her. You know what I mean? Like a sacrificial lamb. But she's in dirty. You know what I mean? It's just like how deep.
Mhm.
I
Hmm.
think that's pretty interesting because she would have to know why Fred's there, which means she would have to know about the vice presidential candidate, which I think we know she knew about that and disagreed, but I didn't know how deep she got into it. You know what I mean?
She
Like,
reacted when she found out it was one of Heller's people.
yeah,
Uh, she she was surprised that it was a Heller person, so I think she was actually kind of in the dark,
okay,
uh, at least at that point. Now, like the way it's being written here, like maybe she just understood that the Church of Fred Christ was becoming a political ally of the Smiler at
maybe,
the
yeah,
time.
it's
It,
ambiguous.
yeah, it's ambiguous. It's curious how much she knows and how much she suspects,
Yeah,
because probably the reason that she would hate Fred Christ is because he was running girls, but probably couldn't prove it, and maybe this is kind of an Epstein situation,
yeah, and honestly, I mean, if you're in politics, you're not clean. It's just to what extent are you dirty? You know what I mean? So,
right?
Right.
But when the Bastard Farm story was blown of Josh Free being a cloned candidate that was uh, upgraded by money from Fred Christ, um, that apparently was the cue to completely cut Fred out of the Smiler's machinations. Um, but he notes that he knew that this was also the point where Vita was going to get killed. And he says that a lot of people did. And he even won drugs off of it. He scored it off of Kristen or Kirsten or whatever that bitch's name is.
yeah, it's really interesting. We get an awesome anecdote here, and like it's so interesting because when you have a character like the Smiler who is a diabolical sociopath for all intents and purposes, you realize with a lot of characters like this and with a lot of real people like this, they fundamentally lack imagination. They just do the same thing over and over,
Right.
and that I think that's really like puts him into context because he's been kind of like a well, to quote or to reference your other show, Lex Luthor, a man standing over everything, cackling, and he has all the plans, and he's one step ahead of you, and then it's like, no, this guy is just he figured out one thing that works, and he's gonna run into the ground until it doesn't. He's not that smart. He's not a genius. So yeah.
Yeah. It seems it I should also call out this one very much reminds me of the Checkers speech from Nixon,
Oh yeah.
where he says the only political contribution I got was a dog.
Yeah.
But it feels like, it's an even more perverse twisting of it because he kills the cat.
Yeah. And then blames it on somebody else.
Right. But yeah, we established that this is just his MO. The Smiler will just kill someone and then get the pity for it. And he's been doing this way before the presidency.
And it's escalated if you think about it.
Right.
And so to the point that he sacrifices his own family, it's like, what does he have left? You know what I mean? Like at a certain point, he's going to run out.
And then Fred continues after sort of like giving his whole like thesis about how the Smiler operates. He says that he tried to get back in his good graces by providing him with girls.
Hmm.
But then we reveal that was it Lindsay something from Hotel Fat uh, was taking the credit for all of the, I keep saying girls, but like
Arrangements.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's interesting because we saw what happened to him. So maybe Fred's better off ish, kind of.
yeah. He points out that the Smiler didn't even think to go after Fred in the situation when he cleaned house, and we get confirmation that yes, that was one of the Smiler's people who killed him. Not that we needed further confirmation. We saw him get in a police car, but
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, and this is a moment where we have a little bit of a goofiness here, where Spider goes to strike Fred, and Fred like sits up just in time to avoid it, and then has this sort of like weird, goofy smile when he notes that the guy got killed instead of him.
Yeah, that's funny. I didn't even notice that when I first read it.
But Spider then asks Shannon if she can confirm the whole transient hooker situation, and she says that like we all knew that piece of shit. The only thing that I find surprising is that she takes the cigarette out of Fred's mouth and takes a drag and then throws it at him, and I'm like, he's covered in blood. Like there is no way I'd put my lips on anything that his lips have touched.
He wiped it off. There's a nice little panel between where she's wiping it off, and it's like, okay, there you go. All right, back.
But that's when Spider asks Yelena how the recorder's doing, and Fred's like, "You're recording me? Like this is under duress. Like this is not
Yeah.
legitimate evidence here." And Spider's like, "I'm like you forget, Fred. I'm not employed on a paper anymore. Journalistic ethics no longer apply to me. The rules don't apply to me." And then we get the shot.
I also like that he brought around the chair leg again for that rant. Very good. Just reminding us. But yeah, just the shot of the hit, but then also the shot afterwards of him dropping the stick is fucking iconic looking.
I will give you a spoiler, Keith. I had stopped sending you episode art when I got ahead of where you were in the reading order.
Yeah.
This shot of Spider hitting Fred is the episode art for this episode.
Hell yeah.
So Spider says, "This was our final conversation, Fred. Like I said, I don't need to follow rules. I'm an outlaw journalist. Now I can use your words any way I like." And then Spider and his assistants all take out cigarettes and all light up at the same time. And they note that if Spider could find him, Callahan can find him. And
So
this is,
it's so good.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and they head out. And that's the end of that little duology right there.
And
Uh,
probably the end of Fred Christ.
I mean, it's strongly implied that he doesn't have much time left.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we pick up with one of my favorite stories in the book, which is
I
Two-Fisted Editor.
I fucking loved this issue so much. You know, I have a little weakness for Royce. I always have. I love him.
I know, right?
He's great.
Yeah, we open with Royce feeding the four-winged pigeons on a bench that says this bench releases level 8 virus 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
It's like the joke about like the power plant in The Simpsons, just like you know how it like irradiates the fish and causes them to mutate, but like in a dystopian level. So it's just yeah, sure. Four winged pigeons. It's just the same thing, but more. You know, it's like dogs with two tails and cats with two heads. It's so depressingly absurdist
It
in
it is, but you know what? Like, so I was listening to the Superman commentary track last night for an upcoming appearance on One Track Mind, which is a podcast about commentary tracks.
Oh,
And James Gunn talks about the parrot flocks of LA. And I was like, wait, I'm not familiar with this. And then he like continues to explain that it's from like domestic parrots that it just got loose in LA and there's just like flocks all around now. And I'm like, that's fucking wild.
oh my gosh.
that's so LA. It's the most LA thing I've ever heard. Of course it is.
But I mean, even that gets back down to like pigeons were like doves, right? That were right.
I think they're essentially the same thing, yeah. I don't know the
Yeah, like
exact like
but like specifically pigeons in like New York are like domestic birds that got loose, right?
likely, yeah. I'm trying to think because like London's known for pigeons too. So, so this whole next issue, I want to say like we talked about this before with another episode. I think this is a very Rodney Ramos Inc. forward issue. Um, and again gets the art credit alongside Derek this time, but just the way like Royce is drawn throughout this, it's very much a collaboration between them. You can feel it.
Yeah. So Royce seems kind of depressed, and he heads back to the Word, and is in a bummer mood. We've seen him have like suicidal thoughts before uh, when going into his office. And he sits down, he sees dripping water from his office ceiling. He asks his computer for what the status of the recovery is, and it's not good. It's not good. It's not very much. Um, and he seems stressed about this one. And then after a second, he goes, "Computer, activate stealth mode."
I don't know what I expected. It wasn't this.
And the computer gives it a rundown of all the information that has actually been able to recover, and that this is all secret information that no one knows about. And then Royce turns to the camera and goes, "Mwahaha." And then Royce goes off and does some investigative journalism himself. He convinces some tech support people to give him phone records that he's not supposed to have, just with bluster, which is great.
I love this because I feel like this is the issue that tells us why he's Spider's friend, not
Mhm.
just his boss. This is why Spider. This is why went to Royce when he came back to the city, right?
Right.
Because he knows this guy. We've not met this guy yet, but he knows this guy.
Yeah, I mean, he even was like sad that Royce had taken like a desk job when he like got
Yeah.
back to the city, and now it's like, nope, no, now we're seeing like all of the awesome shit that he does. Because then
Yeah.
we cut to a dive bar where Royce is talking to a PI, and after the guy's like, I'm not gonna go after like your bosses, like I have high profile clients, I'm gonna lose all my people, and you couldn't afford me anyway. And it's like, well, I wasn't gonna pay for you anyway. I'm gonna blackmail you.
So good.
And this.
I just are getting to the little lonely tear running down that man's nose.
Well, yeah, I was about to.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm like just beholden by that singular image where it looks very resigned and he's just like kind of looking up and his tear runs along the entire curvature of this man's nose and kind of down. Oh, just the fact that like he's completely screwed.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you do my language.
And
For
then
some kind of pederasty, we should point out.
Yeah.
there's another example of like sometimes Ellis likes to throw in an unnecessary bit, and it's that last line in that scene where it's just like, "Oh, they're 15." It's like, man, we didn't need that. Like,
Yeah.
this was
Yeah.
bad enough. Like, it just, I don't know. Sometimes he likes to put that extra bit in that doesn't need to be put in.
Yeah. But then Royce returns to the office and he's like he's got his like he's strutting, he's like all excited till he gets to the actual door and then he like hunches over so he can like keep the facade of being like
Oh yeah.
depressed.
So good.
He just slips back into Al Bundy mode, like, oh, just my life's still
Al
alive.
Bundy mode, yes. That's exactly what it is.
Then he gets a call, I'm presuming from that same PI,
Yeah, I guess that
yeah,
makes sense. I didn't even consciously think of it.
who sends him all the info and then asks, "Can I please have my genitals back?"
I love the wallpaper on his computer.
Yeah, which is just Spider Jerusalem saying, "I'm an idiot.
I'm just
Royce knows
imagining
best."
I'm just imagining Royce in fucking Photoshop making that, being like that son of a bitch.
And then Royce has a meeting with someone who is on a board, presumably the board of directors for the Word. Royce convinces him to come down and talk with no frame or nothing to record him of any kind. But Royce drops a thing of source gas. Uh, which at this point, if this is just a readily available thing, like who could trust anything at this point?
It's probably not super ready available, I guess. Like it does seem like a shady ass thing to do. Like
It's a like it's just one of those things where like the tools they have are just wild and
yeah.
like we've seen what the tools we have today can do to making faith and like just even video evidence fall away completely.
Maybe it's that point of like you reach a certain point of paranoia that you can't even be paranoid anymore. You know what I mean? Like anything
Listen,
anything could be recording me at any time. You know what I mean?
Q
Like
Q
go
was outfitting all the journalists after he left MI6. He was just like, and it's a
ahead.
source gas. And you can like, what are you doing, Q?
Like us with our phones, right? We know our phones are recording everything we do and sending it to companies. We still use them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like it's the price of doing business, I guess.
So we get a great splash panel of Royce just walking with three cigarettes in
It's
hand.
like he's Wolverine, like he's nicotine Wolverine.
Yeah.
That's pretty great, actually.
Actually, sorry, three cigarettes in one hand, a cigarette in his mouth, and a cigarette in his other hand.
Oh gosh, I didn't even see that
Yeah,
in his other
that's
hand.
crazy.
And then he goes to Yelena's dad's house, and Yelena greets him by saying Uncle Mitch, which is a nice callback to the original facade that they
Yeah.
had put up. They ask, "Is he around?" Yeah, he spent the morning collecting frogs in the garden, and now he's throwing them at the TV.
It's funny because you're like, part of you is like, oh yeah, his mind's really degrading. You're like, no, Volume One Spider would have done
Yeah,
Yeah,
that.
yeah, the Shadow Spider sitting there with a bowl of frogs, throwing them at sex puppets. That competed also for the episode art, but I opted for the violence. Mitch asks, How you doing, you freak of nature? And Spider says, I am good. I have frogs. What the hell are you doing here? I
I
have
have frogs.
gifts. And Spider notes that his hand-eye coordination is getting worse, and that he's looking forward to being incontinent soon.
I like that Spider's wearing both his glasses and goggles, implying that he just pulled them down over the glass.
Right.
I think that's great.
Mitch reveals that the disc that he just threw is all the fucking evidence. Which gets
Yeah.
back into my whole thing earlier about like their whole like storing everything on the like the word servers. Like, how big of a format do you need? Like, if Royce can just hand him like a disk and that's like all of the evidence, like
Yeah,
I guess I'm just confused what they see storage capacities for things to be. And I realize that it's none of my fucking business. It's not the point.
it's
But
the story. Yeah. But it goes back to that last volume when he showed up at the press conference and just threw around a bunch of just with storage with information on it to all the journalists, and we're like, oh, that's him giving it away, and then it's like, no, everything was erased. We're like, but he gave hard copies away, and we were all kind of like, that doesn't make any sense.
right.
And then we kind of like just moved on, and now this brings it back up. It's like, wait a minute, like, yeah,
Spider is surprised at this whole situation, and Royce explains that like he's really good at his job and he does everything
Yeah.
else. Like Spider's a really good writer and like it is a master at that and like needs to be there to do that job.
He needs a
But
guardian angel or like a provider where
right.
it's like you function as a writer, but as a person, you're. So I'm the guy that has to pick up the slack.
Yeah, he says it's because you only know how to write and I've had to learn to do everything else. So
Yeah.
you look at me, you weird little fuck, and you tell me you thought all the evidence was wiped, and I tell you that it's your ass that's just been wiped. Big Daddy Mitch Royce makes it all better.
it's a glorious monologue. I will say that, yeah.
Right.
And
And,
also,
and
he leaves Spider speechless, which not many people have in this book.
so he heads out saying, "Get the bastard," or he says, "Catch them, Spider," specifically.
Yeah.
And then he gets in a cab and he has a great monologue about what he's going to do. And I have never missed having an expense account more than I did in rereading this issue.
Yeah, really great stuff. Like again, we're building the case back up, and this is a big injection of information back to him.
He
I
looks like
love
Ed Asner.
I like Royce playing such an integral part to the conclusion of this story.
Mhm.
You know, I was worried he was going to be a really passive character the entire way through, and this really made him. You know what I mean? Like, I love it.
Yeah. This is like the Mary story. It's like one that has always stood out to me in talking about the book.
Yeah.
And it's why every time we've talked about Royce, I've said Royce Two-Fisted Editor.
I've never caught that.
Well, he's referred to himself as that at other points, but the
Yeah,
fact that
yeah,
that issue is called Two-Fisted Editor has always been a thing that's like stuck out to me about Royce.
it's so great.
First, I want to walk into a bar and drink it. Then I'm going to start a fight with 5 men and win. I love this guy so much.
And then I'm going to make use of a truly staggering number of prostitutes, some of whom I may have once been married to, following which I will buy drugs. In fact, I will show them a large pillowcase and tell them to fill it with drugs. And I'm putting it all in the goddamn expense account.
It's like I feel alive again, damn it. It's like, Kirk at the end of Wrath the Con, where it's like, how
Right.
do you feel alive? But in this case, it's more like, the news editor got off his keister, did something, and it's like, yeah, now I feel alive.
I think also I don't think we mentioned the interesting part is not only did he get all that evidence, he also provided that evidence to prove that yes, the word was pressure to get rid of him.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
he added his own, which I think is really cool. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tons of evidence and yeah, just did a great goddamn job. So moving on to then the arc that takes us through the remainder of the volume, which is the cure. As we noted, these volumes tend to be three-ish issues plus then a three-part story somewhere in there.
hmm hmm
And so this is then the three-part story, The Cure. And we open with fairly detailed drawings of someone rolling a spliff. And then we cut to seeing the person smoke it, which is this this prostitute who is laying low and just getting high, watching Anthrax Cat. And at this point, there is an Osama bin Laden reference on Anthrax Cat, and so I can't
What the
tell. Like,
fuck, man?
yeah,
Yeah.
Like the math checks out. Like he would have had to do that right. He would have written that right after, like within a couple weeks of it happening, because of how far in advance you write comics. You know what I mean? Like that's crazy.
Just immediately brought those references in. I love that the sign or the window that she is sitting next to has a sign that says suicide is illegal.
I like that she's an immediately likable character. Like Derek's art has a way of telling you, especially with the women he draws, of this is a character you're supposed to care about. It happened with Mary, right? It happened with Vita. It's happening with her. Like I really, really like that. Like immediately I was like, I don't know what's going on, but we need to protect this girl is my immediate thought.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But she's just getting high. She's laying low, and we get a page of just noise from Anthrax Cat while she is having visions of weird starships and stuff. Only for her to be awoken by her neighbor, who is a porn star and also a junkie. And it's like, do you want to have sex? Also, do you have drugs?
Also, she mentions that he has a STD called razors, and I don't want to know. Let's just let that go.
Yeah. He also apparently has a textbook dick.
So stupid.
Right. And he tries to convince her that she could have done porn. And she says it's not enough money, too many hours, and also it's something you can't walk away from. And walking away from the job is important to her right now because she is currently in hiding from her previous gigs as a prostitute. And she gives an interesting speech here where it's like that if you walk into like if you she says, if you, speaking to her friend who is a porn star, and I were to walk into a bar and both of us get recognized, they can say, hey, look, that's Phil Hole. He's a porn star. But they can't say, like, I paid $800 to have sex with that girl last weekend. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's, there's definitely a distinction there. You know what I mean? So,
But we also get a moment of her being like, are you sure the door was unlocked?
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice and ominous. Really like
Yeah.
that.
She heads out of the hotel she's staying at, Hotel McCree. Just, what is it? The artist John McCree. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
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 And then when a black car comes by, she takes off her sunglasses to make sure that they can see that she has human eyes.
Yeah. I like that. I know it's also because her sunglasses are literally shaped like transient eyes.
Right. Yeah.
So she's literally given the impression of it. So she's like, nope. Like, I like that a lot, actually.
And we see that the people riding by wearing meta glasses, by the way, uh, are looking for a transient girl.
Which we
We
can kind of summarize from what the rest of the volume's been about.
Yeah. We also see her name on the thing that they're looking at. She walks into a bar to use the phone, and she says that she's running out of money and that she can't stay hiding. Hangs up very frustrated and is about to smash it when Spider Jerusalem and Co. show up, saying that we've got questions for you. She says at first that she's not going to go with them, but Spider is like, "Do you know who I am?" And she's like, "Yeah." "Do you think I'd lie to you?" She's like, "Probably not."
Again, kind of like that that reputation he has in the city specifically.
Yeah.
Like they trust him. The city trusts him.
Yeah, like those moments where it's like he's zany, he's throwing frogs at the TV, he's smashing up windows, and then there's these moments where it's just like he's very sincere, and you kind of and you get why it's like this guy is so compelling as a character because he can wield both extremes and it doesn't feel off-putting at all. Like it feels natural. It's like when it comes to the suffering of others, so beautifully put, he will always care for him. He'll always lend that heart out to him. He's just a crazy bastard the rest of the time because it's his mind just telling him like it's all farce.
But Spider reveals that the only reason that she hasn't been picked up yet is that they're looking for a transient girl and they haven't used a G reader on her.
Yeah.
And he presents one. So G readers have been really useful ever since they first popped up in this book.
Yeah. Obviously, like the result of the big assault that set everything off in the really, really bad times, that's not a great use. But yeah, it does keep coming up. And we kind of talked about like the prevalence of it. Like having access to that would like really like make things fucked up, especially for people of that sort. And like it's just really interesting. Yeah.
So they head out. So the reason I avoid saying this girl's name is that it's like Leslie, but it's like Lazel, is how it's spelled.
It's a very Legion of Superheroes name, where it's
Y-
like it
Y-
go either way.
I just said Leslie to make it easier.
yeah, we'll just say Leslie for this purpose, but there is no like Y or E at the end of it to actually make the Lee part of it. It's just
Liesel?
an L. Yeah, Liesel. I'm going to say Leslie. It's hard to say something else. So Leslie says we have to go back to or to my hotel. It's where all my stuff is there. It's not just drugs. I can't just leave them. And they eventually agree, and they go in. And the doors open when they get there, and she says, "Fucking Phil." Uh,
Yeah.
and she goes to start getting her stuff, and we see while they're getting stuff out of the closet, on the other side of the bed is Phil dead with a gaping wound in his stomach.
It's pronounced Liesel.
Liesel.
It's German. It means good. Huh, that's
Ah,
interesting.
Yeah.
I
all
had
right.
to
I'll say
know.
Liesel. I can say I can try it.
Liesel.
I had
Liesel.
to look it up. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so they're cleaning up stuff, and that's when they discover the body. And Spider has a little bit of a quip, which is Phil's had his last hole.
Yeah.
Uh,
That
I
was a
read that
very
as roll, and I'm like, that makes sense. Oh,
that was a really trying to think of the right maybe Hitchcockian shot. Like
oh,
of showing us the body, but they
y-
don't find it.
right.
yeah. I love this image.
Yeah, you're just like, oh fuck. You're like, oh no.
Yeah.
They find it almost immediately, and I thought, man, if they go a couple pages with it just sitting there and not seeing it, I'm gonna go crazy. Like, yeah.
But then two people in blur suits come, and Spider says, "Yelena," and she pulls out a PlayStation Move controller and turns off their blur suits.
Yeah, that's what happened.
That they do work. Oh,
It deactivates the blur suits, and we've got two guys in suits, one holding a knife, one holding a gun. Uh, and Spider immediately takes a picture of them and points a gun, and it's like, "What are you gonna do? Shoot me with your fucking bowel disruptor?" At which point he just shoots the guy in the waist with his actual gun that he was holding.
So
yeah.
cool. Just a gangster ass shot.
Yeah.
Like,
Now I don't think this guy is dead. Just as a note on that one, he is like clutched in pain, and the wound clearly went through his body, but I feel like it's low enough that he actually might have a chance of surviving.
yeah, maybe not walking, but surviving.
Yeah, and then after Spider says Yelena, Yelena, she finally like shoots the other guy with the bowel disruptor, and they all fucking run. Spider throws his gun away and it explodes. And they get in the car and drive as fast as we can. And here we get into one of those little bits of continuity issues that I think start popping up towards the end of the book, which is uh, Yelena then starts yelling at Spider, "You insane bag of dog shit! You never told me you had a real gun."
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did.
We know that we know that she knows that he had a real gun. He had the whole
Yeah.
gun scene earlier. They talked about like
Oh
where'd you learn
yeah.
to gunfight? She asked, "How many people have you ever killed?"
Yeah. I remember though obviously them people. I was like, she's seen a gun. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you're right.
this is not a surprise. Maybe it's a surprise that he specifically had one with him at that moment, but like that is not the right reaction. And
Yeah. Or
unfortunately,
just the fact that like he fired it in front of her.
it's not even the first time he's shot someone in front of her.
Or it must be her swept up in the moment, like
Yeah.
holy shit, kind of deal. But yeah,
I mean, it's almost the same situation because it was also a dude in a blur suit. So this is one of those spots where it's just my interpretation of this, and there might be some sort of headcanon that makes this work, but my interpretation of this is that there are some continuity issues that pop up in this book just because it was a monthly book that someone is writing as quickly as they could. Even if they had a grand story in mind, there's like little pieces that don't quite fit together.
Yeah, it's like the people I used this example the other day in an argument of people who find slight continuity errors in, say, Star Trek. And I'm like, thousands of episodes, over a dozen movies, hundreds
yeah.
of novels, and you're like, well, this thing, I'm like, it's fiction, man. Maybe this isn't for you.
Like
Like,
TNG is like 7 seasons and 25
yeah,
episodes each season. It's like it's gonna happen.
nothing's waterproof, man. Like that's why I'm
It's
like,
gonna
no,
happen.
Right.
just let it go. Like, yeah, if you want to enjoy long-term fiction, you gotta let some things go.
Yeah, and with this one, it feels like I was gonna say like maybe she swept up the moment, but it has happened to her before. But it's just a kind of like I like a reminder of like what the stakes are going on right now. Where like for Spider, this is not a laughing matter. This is something like he is running on a deadline in every sense of the word. He's on a
Yeah.
deadline. This like he has to get this done as soon as possible. So he's not like fucking around.
Yeah.
And now she's starting to notice that like he's changed, or there is that pressing, looming thread, and he is not in his right mind anymore. Which, arguably, when is he ever? But again, that's besides the point.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's just a continuity issue where they had some good lines written out where it's like that was the point. The last thing anyone briefed on me would expect is a real gun, which is a good line and fair.
Fair
But
enough.
again, we've already had Spider like pull a gun, and sure, the Smiler doesn't necessarily know that he killed those agents before using a gun, um, just because they burn the bodies. Um,
Yeah.
but Yelena does, which is the only spot where I find that specifically weird. And then after pointing out that I just saved your worthless anal discharge of a life and yours, and he points to Liesel, and she says, "What do you want, a blowjob?" And then Yelena says, "Do not answer that." And we get a weird little smirk from Liesel. And
Yeah.
Spider tells Shannon, "Stick to the plan." And he gives a little Batman speech: atomic turbines to speed. Wonder atomic batteries to power turbines to speed to the Spider Cave, is what he says.
I like Yelena's description of Spider next. Was like working for a 4-year-old boy with a massive caffeine high and a permanent yet very small erection. It's like, girl, you saw that erection. Like talking shit.
So the next issue opens with them saying Plan B, and that's where they ditch the car that they were in. Yelena and Liesel complain about the car.
Let's talk real quick. Let's talk about this Glenn Fabry cover.
Oh, sure.
This is just a Batman cover.
It is
Oh
just a
yeah,
Batman cover.
yeah.
Like I love it so much.
It's too heroic. Like you're expecting him to be like kind of like draped over it, just like passed out, maybe drooling on the gargoyle. But like he's looking very heroic while the signal is shining bright. Like you
It's
know.
it's almost like what he sees in his head, what he thinks he looks like.
Oh
Like,
yeah, oh yeah. It's the call, Jim. I must answer it. Kind of
yeah.
deal.
Yeah, fun cover. He's holding a bottle, so at least he's like understands that he's a drunk,
Yeah,
even in his heroic fantasies.
that's a spinach.
But yeah, so they switch cars, and Yelena says, "I don't see the point. We're going back to my dad's place anyway, and I'm damn sure they know where that is." And Spider says, "No, we're not." And this is when he reveals that he doesn't actually trust Yelena with everything, but he trusts Shannon.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, Liesel is taking space dust, and Spider is able to size up the vintage just based on smelling her finger.
Stupid. Like to see how long ago it was made. Like God. I also like how condescending he's like, oh yeah, space dust. Yeah, okay, I guess. I guess that'll get you high. It's just like you want to do some real shit. Like, yeah.
Yeah, so they kind of stew while heading out, and they eventually arrive at Kay's apartment. We get like a little bit of a scene of her computer trying to feed her porn, indicating that it was paid to do so because the artificial intelligences of this world are just as corrupt as all the people. And that's when Spider bursts in the room saying, "Behold, bring your finest meats and cheeses. Your greatest benefactor is made manifest in your tiny peasant's hovel."
I love this scene with her talking to her computer. I think of the wacky technology interactions, it might be my favorite of the book because it's very funny. Like just the whole like, like I'm sorry, but I can't let you do that. It's like, like just the way they go back and forth. The dialogue is very funny. A lot of the time we do this, it's Spider yelling at something. This is
Right.
an actual argument, and that's funnier.
But they bring in Liesel and they sit her down and explain that like, hey, we need to get the whole story now. We don't think we were followed, but we can't be sure that we weren't. And here's my glasses. Try to get all the footage taken off, and let's get this interview going.
So the other person from the word or from the whole, they just disappeared. The other guy, like we keep seeing this specific character and not the other one that was there at the original meeting. And I don't think we've seen him since.
We saw they had sex afterwards
Yeah,
when Spider
yeah,
his first column showed up. But you're right. I can't even remember his name right now. Um,
yeah. It feels like he was a duplicate character, like or not duplicate, but like excessive. It's like we don't need two of these. So
Right.
like so yeah.
So Spider sends the assistants out to get stuff to deal with the crash because Liesel is going to fall hard because she's just been doing drugs for the last like several weeks. And Spider sits down and he says, "I'm Spider Jerusalem. I'm here to help."
He's so funny. It's a good shot though. It's a really good shot. It's probably the most human shot there is of him.
Yeah, he looks older in this shot. Like
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's there's something kind of like a father figure to him in this shot.
yeah.
Yeah.
That to me is like you strip all the grinning like asshole real away. It's like this is a man that's feeling it because he knows it's coming. So he's like, okay, I have to be a bit more vulnerable with this person, and this is what his vulnerability is now shaped to be.
Yeah.
And obviously the windows blown out gives a very kind of saintly image, like you can believe it. This is not like an insincere joke. He is being really sincere. He's trying to help heal her in a way, and that's why like you have like the nice little lighting effect going on, or at least that's what's going on my screen, I think, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm reading from the book itself, so yeah.
Okay.
One thing I want to call attention to that we haven't talked about, but they have referenced in the story is that I mean we've referenced this, but Liesel is formerly a transient. She took the cure
Hmm.
to revert her back to being a human, which is apparently a thing that they haven't really discussed so far in the series. And we open with Spider asking why she took the cure, and so she she says that part of that is because she was told to change her appearance real quick. Part of that was that the transit community kind of doesn't give a shit about you aside from that you're a transient.
Which I thought was really interesting. And one of my thoughts when she was telling this, I thought, oh, it's great because like if Fred Christ does want to get away, he might have to take the cure to hide. And that's very funny to me. Like he'd have to give up the whole transient thing to get away, like she did, you know. And
Right.
I kind of had that in the back of my head. Like if he ever does want to get away, that's what he has to do. But yeah, it's just a really interesting like tale of like again, I keep bringing it back to it, but like this is not a metaphor for the trans community. This is a cult.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
this is Scientology, if anything. You know what I mean? Like it's like if you're not one of them, they don't care. Like yeah,
Yeah. I mean, we've compared it more with like just body modification kind of stuff, but yeah, it's certainly not as deep rooted in an identity
yeah,
as anything. So we get some more information about the sort of hierarchy of like how this all works. That she didn't directly work for Fred, but Fred sort of arranged it, and he got a percentage of this whole thing. Over the course of the conversation, she confirms that she did have sex with the Smiler, and not only that, she has the dress she wore when she had sex with the Smiler. And this is where that G reader comes in handy again.
Yeah.
is this what she went back for to the house?
Probably.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking. Because she's like, no, it's not just drugs. So, and she makes a big deal, not just that it's evidence, but like, this is the fanciest thing I own. You know what I mean? Which, of course, breaks my heart.
So it's this very nice dress that you have to pay extra to get, and the Smiler did. He's also noted as being like kind of mundane, that like just getting a blowjob is considered like a big thing for him.
Yeah, it's about
I wonder
it's a,
what this is about.
yeah. It's about getting it. It's not about what happens. It's the fact that he can get it. That's the difference.
The assistants are out, and there's a big fucking screen that they notice that is available for like all the people in the reclamation zone to be able to watch. And as they walk by, we see a helicopter uh, enter the live feed of the reclamation zone. But then we get more of the sort of story of hooking up with the Smiler, and and yeah, confirmation that she fucked the president. She says just another gig, but that's when it sort of like causes her to process that the people that she used to have relationships with, like the other girls that were involved, they're all dead. And this is where she starts to crash.
Yeah, like this that trauma plus like the coming down from the drugs. It's just a bad combination. It's gonna make you trip, right? like, and just have the worst fucking time.
Right. But Kay comes back in with the G reader and reveals that because the president's genes are apparently on record because of the physicals that he has to take, they were able to match this up with the G reader, and so they have actual proof that this girl slept with the Smiler.
And that's really interesting. And I really like um the way, because this is the end of the issue. I like um this cliffhanger we're left on, because we see that helicopter again and we see you guys rappelling down, and it doesn't tell you exactly where they are. So I'm like, they're coming to the apartment. You know what I mean? Like that's the cliffhanger they leave you on. And then one thing this series does is kind of twist things, twist that expectation, but in a really interesting way. And it does it here again.
We have kind of a surreal cover of Spider on the next issue. Just holding a chainsaw, wearing fake boobs. The fake boob stuff really makes the hunter gatherer character from Venture Brothers be much more present there. But then the last issue of The Cure, part 3 of 3, picks up with armed men rappelling down into the reclamation zone. We see lots of helicopters and lots of thugs, like armed thugs.
Yeah, it's another pretty action-packed sequence, which we talked about. We didn't get for a very long time in this, and we're just now starting to get again. And again, it goes back to the Smiler's complete lack of imagination, right? This is
Yeah.
what he does. He picks on the lowest of the population, the people who can't defend themselves.
They start firing grenades throughout the reclamation site, and we see explosions going off. And then we cut back to Spider and Liesel. He says that I'm going to write the story, and that's how you're going to be free. Like they currently want you because of what you know, but if I get what you know out there, then they can't. Then there's no reason for them to come after you.
Except the Smiler's a sociopath who punishes people just because. But
Yes.
hopefully he'll be out of power.
But before he's able to start working, they get a call from Shannon who says that they think they've been made. Like there's no way to get back to Kay's apartment without walking by some cop car.
Which I really liked because, again, a lot of this has been them protecting Spider, right? And I was kind of like, okay, he's on his own. That's not quite where it went, but that was my thought for it.
Right. We do get a little bit of weirdness in their text situation where it's like, do you have your like little news reader device, which is its own separate thing that she has? Go to specifically the whole slash filthy, and we'll feed you instructions on how to get out of there.
Again, the technology level kind of varies depending on what they need us to know.
But Spider gets a hold of a keyboard and starts typing up the story. And we note him having some issues. He says, like, come on, keep it together. We see ships pulling in with more armed goons.
Definitely not reminding me of anything going on in the current political climate, I guess.
Yeah.
The climate is cold and icy.
Just masked goons going into major cities committing crimes.
Yep. So Spider's working on the story, and he hits a spot where he can't think of the word anymore, and he has to sort of talk his way around it. He beats himself up at first, and then he says, "Restructure the sentence. Work around. This is not going to beat me." And we cut to one of the masked men, illuminated by fire, saying, "Objective achieved. Retreating to start point and awaiting instructions."
Jesus, man, the Smiler's such a piece of shit. Like,
That's when the assistants get back. Spider reveals the story that he's writing. He explains that they have the G reader evidence and says we need to publish the story now. And that's when Kay says like, "Come check out the news." And they're claiming that the people in the reclamation zone started a riot and burned down all these buildings.
same old playbook.
Yep.
Like the Transient started the riot, you know? The protesters started the riot outside of the police station. Same
Yeah.
thing.
And when Yelena remembers that she saw briefly the helicopter show up, that's when Spider runs back to the computer and is like, "We've got to get this feed out because they are using emergency powers." Like, which the one thing that surprises me here is like the emergency, like they already had it because it was already declared martial law. They already understood that part. Um, but he emphasizes that it is martial law and that if they don't get the story out right now, every feed site's going to get shut down and they're not going to be able to get it out at all.
Yeah, they'll get around the hole by just shutting the net off. The hole can't go onto the net if the net's not there.
Right. Spider starts bleeding as he begs Kay to like get the file out. Um, and it's that the drugs were supposed to control the damage, but he doesn't care. And with a bloody fist, he's like, "Help me get the story out while we still can, if we still can." And then we cut to the president.
I like the change to the. I think it's the first time we've seen the full flag because I don't remember seeing a single star flag. So I would have been like, "Isn't that the flag of Texas?" Like it's similar. It's not the same thing, but
Right.
yeah,
I'm not sure if we've seen
yeah,
the full flag before at this point. We've seen a lot of patriotic stuff. Like we've seen a
yeah.
lot of like red, white, and blue with like stars on it. I'm not sure if we've seen the full flag. But certainly it's a workaround instead of having to admit to how many states we've got at this point, just have one giant star.
At a certain point, you have an odd number, and then it's like this looks crooked.
The Smiler thinks that everything's going according to plan right now. He's pretty happy about this. He's explaining that the National Guard and other troops are required will remain in the reclamation zone, and on the main routes to the zone, and they're being directed to help the city's police force. But the situation remains fluid. That's when Robert McX checks out his news feed
With a
and get.
big grin on his fucking face.
Yes, I love it. Again, Robert McX, like I end up really liking because he doesn't like fuck around.
He feels like an old school journalist. You know what I mean? Like especially in this world where they have fucking citizen journalism guys with just cameras on their helmets and walking around interviewing people. This dude is just like in the dirt. You know what I mean? Even if he does seem like he has a Bill O'Reilly type show or something like that, I think we talked before, he's delighted by Spider's nonsense.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, he seems legitimately anti-establishment in a good way.
Yeah. And also like the nerve of this man. Like the way he does this, because I know you're about to ask, you're gonna quote it, so I'll let you do it. But the way he says this isn't just like a journalist. This is someone twisting a knife he's been waiting to twist.
Question, Mr. President. I'm Robert McX. Of course you are. Good to see you, Robert. Mr. President, tell me, when was the last time you had sexual intercourse with a transient prostitute?
God damn. Just fucking boom. So good.
And then conclude the issue with this big splash panel of just the Smiler with the biggest frown.
Yeah.
So good. Such a good lead into a final volume. I'm like, give me 6 issues of this guy's life falling apart. I'll eat it up.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and that's it. That's the volume.
It's a breezier story in a lot of ways. The fact that we open with like a two-parter as opposed to like the one shots that are like spider columns or anything like that. Like
Yeah.
the very cathartic beating of Fred Christ
Yes.
is great. And then we have a very fast story in the form of Two-Fisted Editor, which is just a delight to read. And then The Cure is its own like tight bit right there. So it's we're certainly, I mean, we're this is volume 9 of 10. We're very much in the end game now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's again, it was a little more optimistic compared to the last few because the last few have been really grim. Spider's diagnosis, the whole issue with the kids, which we just didn't even really want to talk about, like, is nice to kind of like brighten up a little bit.
So Duke, how has this experience been for you reading through? Did you read through the whole series before you got up to here, or did you just read this volume for?
I read the previous few issues to remind myself where it was. Then I got this one off of my Kindle account and I reread it and just to reacclimate myself and then go, oh yeah, it's nice when high political figures were,
Hold accountable.
held accountable for their sex crimes.
Yeah. Now, do you think you're going to join us on concluding the story? Are you going to keep reading
Oh
with?
hell yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like I'm already here, so I might as well, reread the final volume again.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine a person just reading this volume and being like, okay, and that's it. I'm done.
Don't need any more information.
Yeah. One
Uh,
of the things I just love about like the first part of The Cure was essentially kind of like it's a very I say it's a very solid way of writing for scripts for comics, where obviously you have the tells like did you leave the door unlocked, and then the obvious like okay they enter the apartment, where's the friends, do you see the shoes? It's I always loved just picking apart those scenes because there's always a tempo to this. You don't want to drag on too long. You want to get into Where's the dead body? There's the dead body. They don't know about the dead body. Stuff like that. That always interests me the most about like, seeing a master at work here and how like the artist works off of that. And just this like the very, you know, uh very clear kind of build up to like, oh shit, this guy's dead. Oh shit, we didn't get out of here. Stuff like that always impresses me because it's it's just so well done. And I love this, three part, like obviously the two fist editor thing, wonderful, nice breather issue, because again, you go through the onslaught of everything falling apart for this poor guy, and you finally get, here's this guy's guardian angel coming back saying, you go write that story, you go nail that son of a bitch to the wall, and you remember that I've always got your back. And that's kind of like that thing in like those boxing movies where it's like you go back there and you go back in that round and you fight one more time and you show them who you are, kind of deal. And I love that about this because it's just a marathon fight. I always appreciate this volume because when you finally get that right hook in, even if it's not Spider Jerusalem asking that question, you feel it, especially that splash page of that man fucking frowning.
Yeah.
I love it so much. So good.
And even if, like, I think it might even be more important that it's not Spider asking the question.
Yes.
That it's because we know Spider's on a deadline. We're on not a deadline, literally
Yeah.
he doesn't have much time left. And it's kind of being like, yeah, there are the people who might not have his methods, but aren't going to take the shit lying down. And I really, really like that. So,
Yeah, Keith, how are you feeling?
really good volume. I really liked it a lot. I like the Liesel character quite a bit. I have a,
Mhm.
I have a weakness for a tragic female waif, like I always have. So I really, really liked her. And the Royce issue is one of my favorite solo issues in the entire run, of course, because it's great. It is up
Yeah.
there with the Mary issue, like you said. Um, yeah, it's really, really good. I liked it a lot. And I'm just so excited to read it. The next one, which I got right here already, right in front of me, um, because he's getting what's coming to him, and it's going to be the most cathartic thing ever. And I'm bracing myself. We talk about this almost every episode, but Cyberpunk is rarely, and they all went home happy. Like, but I think we're
Yeah.
going to get a happy ending, just not necessarily the happiest ending. So, but I really, really like this volume. It was a nice change of pace.
Yeah, it's really the remounting of all Spider's efforts to take down the president for real. We've seen him getting ready, but at the end of the last time, it was like, oh, all my evidence is gone, and we have to start over. And fortunately, I mean, yes, it's kind of a cop out that Royce is able to give him everything back, but um, it's such a compelling story that gets us there, and Spider certainly had to like do a bunch of work, which includes like manhandling Fred Christ to
Yeah.
get himself into position. Like it's not just if the Two Fisted Editor episode happened right after the last volume, then it would have felt more like a bait and switch. Uh, but
Right.
instead we have a pretty compelling two-part story there, and then we have this just one really fun story with Royce doing a goddamn good job, and then we got the cure.
And the story that breaks, the story that has the Smiler finally frowning, isn't the evidence he got before. It's the story, it's the evidence he had to get after he lost everything. So
Hmm.
what Royce got him is now going to be everything else they can reveal later. But the headline, the thing that makes this guy, it's the thing the Smiler didn't see coming. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, because he probably knows exactly what evidence Spider has. You know what I mean? Like, because they got access to it. They probably, looked at it, made a copy, whatever. But he didn't see that shit coming, and I really, really liked that.
So yeah, that wraps up volume 9, The Cure. Duke, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Where can people find you and follow you, man?
You can find me on Blue Sky. Uh, I believe my handle is Duke of Doom. I think it is Duke of Doom. I don't know. I usually just go by Duke. Unlike right here under my window where it says Austin, don't worry about that. I know whose name that is. But still, yeah. So you can find me on Blue Sky on Duke of Doom. I'm on Twitter, but not much. I'm private because I don't want to add to the discourse anymore. So
Yeah, Twitter. I could wax so long and nostalgic for the old days of Twitter, and now it's just X.
yeah, it's like the cacophony of wailing demonic sounds in the ninth circle of hell. It's like, okay, yeah, you kind of get used to it or you don't.
And that's a bummer because like you and I first connected on Twitter back in the day, and
That's yeah.
yeah, so it sucks that uh once wonderful representation of social media has become a cesspool of the worst people. But all good things get corrupted in the cyberpunk world that we live in. Uh,
It's a very mundane cyberpunk world. Where's my cybernetic implants?
I know, right?
I don't know. At CES this year, they were showing off vibro knives for like cutting bread, and I was like, that is so cyberpunk, but at the same time, like it's just the mundane capitalist world that we live in version of it. Keith, how
Yeah.
about you? Where can people find you and follow you?
So I'm the host of a certain POV comic book review show. We have issues, so make sure to check me out. Once I get going again, I don't want to date this, but I should be getting out weekly episodes where I review comic books, every single comic that comes out that week, or at least it feels like it, and just giving them quick fire reviews and just positivity. I like positivity on my show, no negativity. Unless you're Comics Gate, go fuck yourself. You can find me on Blue Sky at We Have Issues for the show. We have issues.bsky.social. You can find me at keithhasissues.bsky.social because I like a theme. And also, the probably the best place to find me is going to be on our Discord, which I absolutely love, and I'm on every single day. And I think Case is about to tell you about a little bit more.
Yeah, the Discord is a great place to find us. You can find a link at certainpov.com or in the show notes for this episode. It's a great time. We don't bite. The conversations flow, but they don't have like that super rapid fire where you can't keep track of what you wrote, like kind of speed. It's a good chill kind of Discord, and we're all really happy and nice. And I really like the space that we've like cultivated there.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, I check it every day. The only things I check every day are Blue Sky and Discord.
So the Discord's a great place to check us out. If you want to find me and are not a fan of Discord, you can find me on most social media platforms at Case Aiken, with the exception of Instagram, where I'm holding on for dear life to my AIM screen name, which is Quetzalcoatl5, Quetzalcoatl5, because I was pretentious in high school, as evidenced by the fact that I was obsessed with Transmetropolitan. That
It's
is,
okay, dude.
yeah. So
My
that
my internet handle was Draco Wheels because I was just like I was fascinated with constellations. So it was like Draco, the dragon constellation. Like no one gets it.
Yeah, it's funny what the handles that we hang on to over the years and the ideas that we had. Um, but things that we should hang on to for sure are the people who have supported this show on Patreon. We've got a Patreon going for Certain POV Media. You can join at patreon.com/certain POV media, and there you can sign up. Even at the free tier, I do essays weekly, one on a nerdy topic, one on a D&D topic, every single week. That's at the free tier. But at paid tiers, you get sneak peeks at stuff that we're working on, and at the highest tiers, you get a shout out at the end of episodes. So I'm going to shout out some wonderful people that are supporting Certain POV Media, and that is Micah McCaw, Carter Hallett, Sean Muir, Lee Gregor, Memento Young, Logan Crowley, Joe Mastropiero, Casey and Nancy Aiken, Adam Samter, and Keith Lettinen.
Woo me.
Uh, if you want to be awesome and join in at the executive producer levels, we would really appreciate it. That helps keep the lights on. And by the time this episode is dropping, I will be a dad a second time. So that is just the craziness of the world. Consider chipping in, or even at the free tier, we'll appreciate having you. But yeah, that is a really big thing, and people should check that out. Otherwise, check out certainpov.com. It's a great website with tons of great shows. We Have Issues is a great show on there. Or you can check out my shows, which are Men of Steel or Another Pass. And otherwise, this has been the word from tomorrow. Have a great week.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.